started. Welcome tonight. I'm Tara Taylor. I'm part of the Centercourt 360 leadership team. We're welcoming Taylor Kenyon and Rick Dugan tonight from Princeton Academy of the Sacred Heart. A little background. Well, today, you're here about learning about the secondary education process. So these guys are pros who are going to give us great tips. So Rick, I'll just do a little intro of you and Taylor, and then you guys can fill in what I've missed. Rick Dugan is in his 6th year as the headmaster of the Princeton Academy of the Sacred Heart, which is an all-boys school, K through 8th. He previously was the director of the upper school for Far Hills Country Day, sorry. Taylor Kenyon is the director of secondary school placement and alumni engagement at Princeton Academy of the Sacred Heart. He is also, let's see, what did I write here?
That's perfect.
Oh, I know. Are you sure? Well, I wrote here that that under your stewardship, the class of 2020 earned admission to 28 highly regarded and top-ranked independent secondary schools. Taylor previously held a 5-year post at the Hotchkiss School in Connecticut, where he oversaw alumni engagement and giving, as well as being involved with their admissions process. So, without further ado, thank you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you so much, Tara, and thanks to everyone who's joining us tonight from the Centercourt community. I'm Rick Dugan, headmaster here at Princeton Academy, and I'm actually in our library right now, bringing you into Princeton Academy of the Sacred Heart. I'm grateful for that introduction, Tara. Thank you. And what I would like to say first and foremost is that I know that we're meeting right now in extraordinary times, and I hope that you and your loved ones are healthy, safe, and well. Please know that our community sends our best wishes your way. We are going to speak tonight about the secondary school placement process. So Mr. Kenyon is going to walk us through with some really wonderful visuals, ways that we work with our young men, so we're a boys' school, our young men in the 7th and 8th grade, and our families. And one of the things that Mr. Kenyon will speak about tonight, and I really want you to think most about, is this concept of fit. Because Taylor, when Tara was reading your introduction, and yes, we're so proud of the amazing schools that our young men are admitted to, and more so we're proud of our young men, but at the core of that is that we seek to help our boys find a great fit, someplace where they'll go and thrive. And so if you're listening right now, I would say that I know we're coming from all different areas geographically, but in the state of New Jersey and in the surrounding area of the Northeast, there are so many wonderful options that if you take your time and pause and reflect, you will find a great fit, and there's a school out there for everybody. In my intro, Tara mentioned that prior to being at Princeton Academy, I was at Far Hills Country Day School. And so I've been working in this placement world for many years, and have been fortunate to meet just some wonderful people in admissions at secondary school. Prior to Far Hills, I was at the Del Barton School for 9 years, where I was able to teach and coach and do a variety of things too. So I come to you tonight really in the spirit of sharing, and Taylor and I look forward to a great conversation. So Taylor, good to see you again today.
Yes, good to see you again, Rick. And thank you so much, Tara, for setting this up. And those who are tuned in now or are watching this recording later, I appreciate your time as well. You guys who are on the call right now can feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation. We have a small group here, so it can definitely be conversational. Feel free, if you're feeling up for it, to log into your video or just ask questions in the chat, ask questions through audio, however you'd like to do it. The presentation that we're going to go over is a little Princeton Academy of the Sacred Heart specific, is a little bit about our process, but I want to definitely cater our conversation tonight to things that are helpful to all different kinds of people. So you might hear me say our boys or something along those lines, but it's applicable to girls too. It's applicable to people of all different ages, coming from public schools, other independent schools, whatever it is. So I also am a member of the Centercourt community. I coach out of the Lawrence facility. I coached lacrosse, high school lacrosse last summer, and I'm hoping to get involved in some lacrosse later this summer, if and when that's appropriate in the state of New Jersey. We'll see. But thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and I'll just get right into the PowerPoint if that makes sense. So let me share my screen. Are we seeing that okay?
Perfect.
Great.
Okay, so secondary school placement, as we call it at Princeton Academy, high school placement, applying to private high school, any way you want to look at it. That's what we'll be talking about tonight. So at Princeton Academy of the Sacred Heart, our mission is to develop young men with active and creative minds, a sense of understanding and compassion for others, and the courage to act on their beliefs. And as an independent Catholic boys' school, we are committed to educating and developing the whole boy in mind, body, and spirit. So creative, compassionate, and courageous young men is something that is really at the heart of our school. It's right there in the mission. You hear Rick and I talk about it a lot, and it's something that we talk about a lot through this process, and something that I think in general has come to set Princeton Academy boys out in this process and give us some success over the years. Is that we do fulfill our mission. We do create these 7th and 8th grade, 13, 14-year-old young men who are able to walk into a room with a complete stranger and tell their stories. That takes courageousness. They have these great stories to tell about their community service and helping their younger students around, their prayer buddies on campus. That's, their compassion. And they get the opportunity to really do a lot of hands-on, creative, exploratory work at Princeton Academy. We do these 2 major projects in the middle school called the Independent Science Project, which basically takes over the middle school for about 3 or 4 weeks in January. And then in the spring, we do the Wax Museum, which is sort of a historical deep dive into an individual where all the boys get to come in dressed as that person and present on that person's life. So we also definitely have creative boys, young men. So I'm saying this because whether you go to Princeton Academy or not, being creative, compassionate, and courageous throughout this process, we feel yields success throughout this process. And, before I came to Princeton Academy, Tara mentioned I worked at the Hotchkiss School in the admission office briefly. Mr. Dugan worked in the admission office at Del Barton. I have plenty of good friends now in this world that I speak to on a regular basis, so I really understand the world in and out, and the world of secondary school admission that is in and out. And we hear time and time again that, our young men are able to look people in the eyes, shake their hands, tell their stories, present themselves eloquently. And then once they get to the secondary schools, really act as gentlemen in every sense of the word. And at, disproportionate numbers go on to serve as student body presidents and club leaders and team captains and things like that.
And Mr. Kenyon, just quickly before we move off this slide, and let me make it general in the biggest sense, and whether you're a young woman listening right now or a young man or a parent, a mom and dad, I want to just take a second on mission. So thank you, Mr. Kenyon, for sharing the mission of Princeton Academy. We believe in it and we think it's a cause. And anyone who's looking to apply to a private school should look at a school's mission. So this happens to be our mission, and it's really special, I think, and unique given who we serve. And every private school, every independent school, you'll hear that term today too, is guided by a mission. And to be candid, while many of them are similar in certain ways, they're going to be unique in certain ways too. So 101, first step in this process, what's the school's mission? And does that align with your own personal values or beliefs? So perfect. And thanks, Mr. Kenyon. And we can go through that next slide where we've had our good introductions. And
that's great.
I look about 20 years younger there, which is also good. So
I just like to keep this slide in there to remind folks that I am an office of one at Princeton Academy, but Mr. Dugan and I definitely make a team of 2 to support our young men and our families through the secondary school placement process. Mr. Dugan mentioned, he spent some time at Far Hills Country Day School prior to Princeton Academy, where he actually served in my role for some time. He knows just about everyone in my world in this space. It's definitely good to have Rick's, reputation and Rick's voice in representing and advocating for the students along the way. It means a lot, and he's a great partner for me in this process as well. So.
Well, you're kind to say that, and just as I continue, thank you very much, sincerely. But as I continue to generalize, so again, no matter where you are, maybe you're in a public middle school right now, and you're thinking about applying to private school. You may or may not have Mr. Kenyon, right? Somebody whose full-time responsibility is to work with you in this placement process, which, by the way, is the equivalent to college placement, right? In a high school moving on to the university. So if you don't have that person in your school, that's okay. You can find a teacher or a mentor or a role model, a parent or some other person to guide you. And I'm speaking to the students right now throughout this process. So just know that you're not alone. If you're interested in learning more about Princeton Academy, that's great. If that doesn't apply to you, work with someone and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Thank you, Rick. And we will have opportunities for boys, girls, and people of all different ages that we can talk about later too. So our secondary school placement philosophy is based around one concept, that is fit. Mr. Dugan already mentioned it. We don't expect that, all 30 or 32 of our graduates are going to go off to, let's say, the Lawrenceville School, which is a big school for our young men, or Phillips Academy Andover up in Massachusetts, or one of those kinds of schools. It's not for everyone, not all 30 of our boys would thrive at a school like that and would become the best version of themselves 4 years from now at a school like that. So we definitely like to think about fit, like to lead with fit. And the great thing about PASH, one of the things that makes us very unique is that we're small. I just mentioned it, 30, 32 kids a class. Not only Mr. Dugan and the classroom teachers, but myself, I really have the opportunity to get to know all of these students really, really well. I'm a squash coach and lacrosse coach in the middle school. I coach the 3rd and 4th grade CYO basketball teams, which is a great joy of mine on the weekends. I work in the middle school admissions process. So if kids are coming in as middle schoolers, I get to know them even before they're Princeton Academy students. And, I have a lot of different opportunities to interface with people. And then, I also know my colleagues really well. So I can go to the 7th and 8th grade social studies teacher, Tim Stevens, and ask about a student if I have a question about the way he's been acting lately, or what him's seen in him growth-wise over time, or whatever it is. So we can really get to know the kids. We have a really small, intimate community, and we can really concentrate on fit throughout the process. All righty.
And so helping you find fit, no matter where you are, again, who's that person, right? Who are you going to identify? Is it your history teacher? Is it your coach? Because again, one of the things that we're going to talk about is if you're 13 or 14 years old, this could be a really intimidating experience, right? You're applying to private school and it's competitive and it's more work. And we understand that. It's also such an amazing and rewarding opportunity, not just because you may get into a great school, but because you're being asked to pause and reflect on who you are and what matters to you. And that's directly linked to fit. And when you can come to that and understand what makes you, you, and then communicate it in this process, you will thrive. And so sometimes having somebody else help you in that partnership is going to be really important. So
awesome. Thank you, Rick. So what makes our process different? I'm a 12-month of the year school employee. You won't find someone whose primary role is secondary school placement at every K through 8 school. A lot of the schools are smaller in staffing. Sometimes a head of middle school handles it. Sometimes a head of school, him or herself, handles it. Sometimes it falls to a group of different people. But, I ultimately take great responsibility, great pride in the work that I do, and oversee, make sure that all 30 families and all 30 young men, really feel prepared at each stage in the process, feel prepared for walking into that interviews, feel prepared when they're filling out their applications, feel prepared when, questions about financial aid come up, whatever it is. And also, again, what makes us different is Mr. Dugan and his knowledge in this area. We've really, I can't overemphasize enough the fact that secondary schools out there have discovered Princeton Academy. Some of the finest in the nation want to come and see our boys several times throughout this process and really get to know them en masse. So even if, let's just say there's a boarding school in Connecticut or Massachusetts that can only expect maybe 5 or 7 of our boys to apply or really even be qualified for a high tier school and interested in applying to a boarding school, they'll come and they'll get to know all 30 of our boys in the spring of their seventh grade, in the fall of their eighth grade, once again, multiple times. When our boys are on these campuses for their tours and interviews, they get showed a very, very good experience. They all wear this lovely Princeton Academy tie that I have on this evening, that's given to them on the first day of school, their eighth grade year, so they're very recognizable. And there are a lot of really good people in this admissions world who, when they know someone, when they know a Mr. Dugan, when they know a Mr. Kenyon from Princeton Academy, that means something, and they'll go above and beyond to show, a young man from Princeton Academy and his family a really good experience while they're on campus. So our process, I'm going to breeze through this because it's super PASH specific, and I want to get to your questions if you have any. But I want to highlight a couple things on here that, like I mentioned on a couple slides ago, are opportunities for all. So normally we would have a secondary school fair on our campus in the spring. That would be open to the general public. So it's mandatory for our seventh graders. It's, open to our fifth and sixth grade families if they're interested, and it is open to the general public. So, you can look out for information on that. You can reach out to me about when that would be. We're talking next spring if it works out for your child and their process. I would love to have you on our campus in our gym meeting between 30 and 40 different secondary schools from the New Jersey area and beyond.
And Mr. Kenyon, what I'll say is, of course, things are different right now with distance learning and social distancing. But in a normal capacity, when you think of secondary school fairs, what Mr. Kenyon's getting into right now in that spring of grade 7, right, applying for ninth grade, are opportunities to come to get to know schools, right? So wherever you are, you can find opportunities to get to know schools through fairs and some of these other moments here. So that's something you can start to do actively early in the process.
Definitely. And let's just assume that some of the families on the process are on the webinar rather are 1 year away from wanting to apply to school. So wanting to enroll in a high school in the fall of 2021. Right now is a really good time to fill out inquiry forms at, however many schools you might be interested in, whether it's 10, 20, you don't have to be afraid about filling out 25 or 30 inquiry forms, because that's not committing you to apply to that school or enroll at that school tomorrow. It's just, getting more information. If you're interested in a particular sport, a particular art or music, a lot of these schools really go above and beyond. Once you click that box to have a varsity coach reach out to have an art department chair reach out to you about a program, you click a box that says you're interested in doing speech and debate at certain schools, and the next day you're going to have an email from that speech and debate coach, things like that. It's really good. This is a very human process. As it compares to the college process, which some people on the webinar might be more familiar with. It is much more human. People in this world understand that we're talking about 13, 14, whatever it is, 15, 16-year-old kids going through this admission process, and that they're not, fully formed, functioning, perfect adults who don't make mistakes. I mean, obviously, fully formed adults make mistakes all the time.
I've never even met a fully formed, perfect adult, right? Exactly. So we're all somewhere on this journey, and I think your point's really well taken in the sense that this one is unique, and the experts in the admission field, they know children, they know adolescents, and you're going to see as we talk forward here, their biggest goal in this process is to get to know the applicant. And so you mentioned it being human. As we look through some of these points, and I'm sure folks can read the slide here, Mr. Kenyon, it's highly relational as well. So again, sometimes we think it's daunting, right? Like, how could I get access to an admission officer or have a conversation? As you just mentioned, really every school's website with a click of a button enables you to connect in some way, shape, or form with a school. And that begins the relationship. I like what you said about being a year and a half out.
Yes.
So the SSAT here too.
Definitely. And quickly, while we're still on this topic, in terms of, checking in on all these different schools that you might be interested in right now, these schools, a lot of them are also going above and beyond to create fantastic virtual digital content in terms of tours, ways to see campus. We just were on a webinar earlier this afternoon with my alma mater, the Hotchkiss School up in Lakeville, Connecticut, who are getting ready to, announce a series of weekly talks from their admissions office. There's going to be a lot of offerings out there from admissions offices for kids that are interested in applying for the fall of 2021. So check out those schools that you might be interested in, get into their pipeline, fill out those inquiry forms, and see what events they're throwing. SAT is definitely an important part of this process. We're going to get to a slide about all the different components, but prep really has to start in earnest in the spring of the 7th grade year. So if you are a year and a half out, definitely recommend. Ooh, it's under my computer. I'm using it as a stand right now, but definitely recommend getting this book, The Princeton Review, Cracking the SSAT. I have 2020, so 2020 is already out. This will be, the newest edition that's out for the test that you might take next fall. Princeton Review employs a lot of people that, at one time worked at the SAT or the EMA, who are the people that create the SSAT. So they have, a lot of former test writers working in-house creating these practice tests. It's really good material.
And for her parent, can I ask you a quick question? For a parent who's not gone through this process, is SSAT similar to like the SAT where you should hire a tutor?
Tutors are an option. Every kid's different. That's what I always tell my parents, is that you got to figure out what's going to work for your kid. Maybe you have a highly motivated kid that's going to be able to. I was about to mention that SSAT.org offers a pretty modestly priced practice portal that you can practice right from, the people that make the SSAT right there. It's questions from former years and stuff like that. But if your kid is not someone who is going to sit down and do work on his or her own very easily, or needs some more structure, certainly our families work with tutors. Other families going through this process work with tutors. Again, Princeton Review, a New Jersey-based organization, offers a very upscale tutor price for families interested, but there's tons out there. If people on this webinar are interested, I'll provide my email at some point, and you can feel free to reach out to me for some options that boys have worked with in the past. There are certainly online options. You could Google SSAT tutoring in your neighborhood, and I'm sure find a reputable.
Okay.
And so Tara, to your point, yes, it's a different test than the SAT, and Mr. Kenyon's going to break it down in just another slide. But the answer is yes, and it's something that I think our biggest recommendation would be familiarize yourself with the test early, and then spread the preparation out over a period of time rather than cram it or jam it into a condensed period of time. We talk about the slow drip with our young men. Better to work slow and steady on this and see the improvement moving forward. But it's something that we'll talk more about in just a second here too. Normally
in our process at this point, we would have, it probably would be this week. It would have been this week or next week. I would be administering a practice SAT to all my 7th grade students, where they're scored taking the upper level tests that they'll take in the fall of their 8th grade year, and compared to all the 8th graders that took it this year. So it's kind of a harsh scale, but it's good as a jumping off point to see what more is needed maybe to be done going into the summer. But SAT is just one component. We don't need to spend this. We don't want to turn this into an SAT webinar. EMA offers plenty of good webinars. Go to SAT.org. You can learn all about it from the people who really know the test in and out. It's one component, but it is one that we'd be getting rolling on right now, and we are getting rolling on right now virtually with our 7th graders. So the other thing on this slide that I really wanted to mention, and it's really exciting that it's going to be actually, we hope, more available to more people this summer for the first time, because it won't be in person, is our Academy Prep Summer Program. So this has become a staple of Princeton Academy. We are known for it in the area. People come and find us from other area secondary schools, and word gets around pretty quickly. I'm sure it's similar in the neighborhoods you guys live in New Jersey. But we normally, I'll talk about what it's going to be this summer. So this summer, it's going to be 3 sessions. It's going to be spread out because I only want to keep kids' attention, about 3 hours a day on Zoom. So we're going to do it over 2 weeks in the mornings, 9 to 12. I think it's actually 9:30 to 12:30. One offering in June, one in July, one in August. We recommend that kids sign up for, 2 weeks back to back, and it'll be a really great experience. we'll dive in, pretty deeply on each section of the SSAT and strategy for studying on that in depth. But then we also really tackle every aspect of the process. So we start working on our essays. We start talking about storytelling through essays and through interviews and through other interactions that we get to have with admissions officers throughout the process. We do work on interviews. I do 1-minute interviews with students in front of everyone else, and we give real-time feedback. I have the kids interview each other. I have friends of mine from the Princeton Academy administration, and at times parents and alumni as well, help me out by interviewing the kids for more extended periods of time. And then what's really great is that it's not just me yammering at, my Princeton Academy 7th graders and some other folks from the area. Other people are coming in to reinforce what I'm telling them or to share their own perspective. So Mr. Dugan's a great partner in Academy Prep. Our Director of Enrollment Management, Hillary Nastro, a former Associate Director of Admission and Financial Aid at Choate Rosemary Hall, and a former Associate Director of Admission at Mo Beard and Princeton Day School, independent schools in New Jersey, certainly knows her way around the admissions world as well. She helps me a good deal. And then I get, colleagues from other schools, whether it's Princeton Day School or the Pennington School or the Hotchkiss School or Blair Academy, the Hill School, Choate Rosemary Hall. These are all schools that we have, really, really, really strong relationships with. And then each year, a staple of Academy Prep has been also a group tour of the Lawrenceville School, another school that we have a very, very strong relationship with. So it provides our students, not just our Princeton Academy students, but our Academy Prep students, the opportunity that other kids do not get to engage with these people throughout the process. When last year, when Mr. Dugan and I took our group tour of the Lawrenceville School, and we ended up spending an hour with Sam Washington, who's a Lawrenceville alumnus, been in the admissions office for 30 years. He's their director of multicultural diversity initiatives. And he gave us an hour of our time, 15, 17, 7th graders, rising 8th graders. These kids didn't know how good they had it during that session with Mr. Washington.
Awesome.
So it's a really, really great experience for anyone who signs up for it. I'm going to...
What we can do, Mr. Kenyon, is,
Yep.
and to the audience, so yeah, this is open, as Mr. Kenyon said, to the public, young men and young women. And Tara, maybe what we could do is in some way, shape, or form, share the registration link, and folks who are interested could take a look.
Absolutely. Yep.
I would love to make one clarification about who it's open to too. Like I said, we're very excited about it being open to potentially more people this year because it is virtual. I do recommend only signing up for it if you are this 1 year away from the process that we're talking about. So let's say
Arriving 8th grade.
Yeah, exactly. Or you could be a rising 10th grader thinking
right.
about applying for 11th grade, right? Whatever it is. But if you're a rising 7th grader wanting to apply for the fall of 2022, we'll love to have you in Academy Prep next summer, in person or otherwise.
Great.
Okay, cool. Let's keep moving so we can get to some questions. So this is the rest of our process. Fall ramps up. I mean, these kids get back to school in September and have about a week, maybe 10 days of being, normal Princeton Academy students like they've been all along. And then we have about a 2-month period from late September to late November where we are doing a lot. We are going to school fairs. We are having 20 to 30 schools during those 2 months come and have lunch with all 30 of our 8th graders or all 32 of our 8th graders at one time. We were having a couple other schools come for more intimate, only the students that are interested in the school. So maybe 5 to 10 students at a specific school chats that, other K through 8 students certainly don't get opportunities like that over and over. We're doing tons of mock interviews. The families are starting to ramp up what they're doing, not just me at school with the boys. So the families are starting to attend open houses. They're starting to schedule their interviews. I always encourage my families, and so I'll mention this to everyone, to schedule your interviews early. Maybe you don't feel like you're ready for your interview yet, so you don't want to schedule it, but that's okay. Schedule it for 2 months from now. Call them up in September and schedule it for mid-December. That's fine. We host SSATs at Princeton Academy. tours and interviews. We do this thing called an engagement sheet, which you'll start working on if you do come to Academy Prep this summer. It's sort of, let's call it the middle school equivalent of a resume. We get kids more used to bragging about themselves, for lack of a better word. You know, a lot of our boys have been told for years at Princeton Academy to be humble, and a lot of them are. And a lot of them, you know, need practice talking about themselves and describing all the cool things they've been up to for the last few years and all the interests they have that they want to pursue in high school. So.
And, you know, with that, Mr. Kenyon, so, you know, if you're at Princeton Academy, we've got the form, we work with you on it and you can fill it out. But here's an opportunity, because young people are doing, and they're not stopping to think, to your point, about what I've accomplished, right? Yep. And so now hit that pause button and think about academics, athletics, the arts, community. Those are 4 buckets, and maybe you can think of some others too, but what are some achievements? What are some things that we've done? And to parents who might be on the line right now, again, better to engage in this process over time. Like most things when we're with our children, if we make it a task that has to be done by tomorrow, it becomes an arduous process, right? Versus we're in the car going to games, or, you know, going to family member's house or whatnot. We can have conversations. What are you most proud of in your athletics? What's the most fun thing that you've done in the arts, and get them thinking about it well in advance.
Awesome. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I think that it's this time of year, you know, on this slide, I mean, September, October, November, when a lot of parents start coming to me and saying, oh my goodness, I never knew X, Y, and Z about my son, but he has made it very clear to me that these are important to him, and that this is what he wants his experience to be. So it's a process of self-discovery as it is, as much as it is anything else.
Excellent.
So we get into November, December, January. That's when the boys are finishing up their essays. Parents, if you know, this is your first time going through the process, you are going to fill out a parent statement on your child as well if you're applying to independent schools. I'll mention on the next slide a little bit about the Common App, but I'm trying to think. I guess we can just keep on moving.
Yeah, let's see the next slide, which is a great one to kind of frame. Here we go, right? The 5 components of the process.
Yeah, so this isn't, you know, Princeton Academy trademarked or anything like that. This is something that is out there that, you know, just about every admission office you encounter will talk about. So if you're going to sit in your interview next fall and ask Mr. or Mrs. Interviewer from whatever independent school it is, you know, what's the most important? What do I have to do to get in here? This is my dream school. They are pretty likely to maybe give you an answer, something like this slide. Well, we look at 5 different things. So every school's going to certainly look at the transcript. I'll start there. So at Princeton Academy, we send 6th, 7th, and 8th grade grades. Every school actually does it a little bit differently. Some schools might send some comments along. You know, every school's on their own quarter, trimester, semester grading system. So your transcript might look a little bit different, and you should, you know what's on that transcript if you can, and you have that as an option.
And on that real quick, because obviously the academic performance is going to be one of the most important components of gauging fit and also earning admission. What we like to say is, sure, maybe some students are straight A students, and that's great. Other students may have other academic profiles, and that's fine too. When we're looking into spring of 7th grade year and into the fall of the 8th grade year, one of the best possible scenarios is an upward trajectory, right? Again, going back to that concept of 13 years old, if we can show signs of academic improvement and engagement, that's number one. And, you know, you see it's linked to the SSAT, which is another academic indicator, but transcript carries the day, because that shows an admission officer how you perform in class, participation, homework, all of those things.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. Teacher recommendations, another thing that's a little bit outside of your control, but I'll tell you how you can control it. Have great relationships with specifically your current, meaning, you know, let's talk about 8th grade at Princeton Academy, math and English teachers. There's also always going to be a 3rd school recommendation. So, you know, let's say you're at a public school now, that might be written by a principal. If you're at another independent school, it might be written by your head of middle school or your 8th grade advisor or something like that. If you're at Princeton Academy, it's written by Mr. Dugan and myself. Everyone all these different applications, and I'm sorry, we skipped the application bullet for now, but we're going to come back to it. Don't worry. All the applications do give different and varying options for additional recommendations. It's kind of school specific, basically. So a school can decide whether, okay, yeah, we'd also like to hear from a Spanish or history teacher, or we'd also like to hear from a coach if you've got one, or a special interest, you know, a music teacher if you've got one, whatever it is. And sometimes those are people from sometimes those are people from within your school community. Sometimes it's your outside of school soccer coach or hockey coach or tennis coach that works with you on the weekend. So go ahead, Rick.
And teacher recommendations are super important. This is how schools are going, one way that schools are going to gauge character. And so to the students, just always be your best self. And that will ring true. Piece of advice, you want to give your teachers in particular, or whoever's writing the recommendation, as much runway time as possible to get it done. The tour and the interview, Mr. Kenyon.
Yes. So, you know, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but this is definitely where Princeton Academy young men have differentiated themselves over the years, these personal interactions that you get to have. It is a very important day. I come dressed to this webinar from my bedroom in my tie to relay the fact that, you know, if you're going to interview at an independent secondary school, it's probably proper attire if you're a young man, or, you know, equivalent if you're a young woman. You can never be overdressed for an interview. You know, if you are comfortable, if you look at a school and they don't have a dress code, or you look at the school and you want to adhere to their dress code and not necessarily wear a coat and tie because all the students there are only going to be in polo shirts, that's fine. That's fine. But Princeton Academy boys, they're going to show up in their coat and tie. So to each their own.
In the interview, so 2 points, if I may, on this. Number one, the interview, at its best, it's a great conversation.
Yep.
And so prepare for that, right? Not script yourself, because that can be detected. You never know what questions are going to be asked in an interview. And at the level of schools that we've been discussing, the admission folks really know how to get young people to talk. And some of the best interviews revolve around the things that are least obvious. My passion for cooking, fly fishing, whatever it might be that you can spark a relationship with. And so be your natural self, have questions that you would like to ask the interviewer as well. And we talk to our young men about conversational questions, not website questions. If you can find the answer on the website, avoid asking a question. But if you can actually use it to stimulate a conversation, that's great. And then with the tour, and I'm just conscious of time, Mr. Kenyon, so as we work through this here, as it relates to the tour, this is your chance to see the school, and this is generally student and parents. Word of advice to the student, engage the tour guide as much as possible. The tour guide most likely will be asked to evaluate the time that he or she spent with you, and that goes into your admission file. But again, be your authentic self. Ask questions, ask about that person's life, and it'll help you find fit. Word of advice to parents. Take a step behind your son or daughter, or stay at their shoulder. Let them do the talking. Allow them to see the school through their own eyes. And of course, engage the tour guide yourself in questions and everything else. But it really is a moment to allow your child to shine and to take it in. And then when you ride home, you have an awesome opportunity to talk. I do recommend eating a sandwich before you engage in that conversation. Going right to it, that might not be the best idea. Get a bite to eat and then say, how'd it go? What'd you think? And then you can get into a great conversation. So tour and interview, most exciting parts.
Awesome. And he did such a great job on that. And I do want to keep moving, but I have a couple more points on the interview, but quickly on that, you know, when you're there touring and interviewing, these schools really want to show you a good experience. If you're hungry, ask about eating in the dining hall, ask about coming early and getting breakfast or staying for lunch. You know, that can be an option. But what I wanted to share with you guys is as a new admission officer, in the not so, you know, distant past, I was, you know, specifically instructed that my first and foremost job was to make sure that the interviewee had a good experience, left the room feeling good about the school that I worked at and wanting to apply. My second job was to get to know that person as best I could and figure out if they were going to be a good fit for Hotchkiss. So, it's really It's like we've been saying, it's a lot of nice people. It's people who are professionals at talking to young adults, want to talk to you, want to engage with you, want to hear your stories, and want to see you in the best light and see you succeed. So don't be afraid to come out of your shell. The last thing I'm going to say quickly on interviews, and Mr. Dugan alluded to it briefly himself, but when it gets to the point in the interview where the interviewer says, okay, well, we're getting low on time here. I'm sure you have questions for me. What questions do you have for me about the school that weren't answered on your tour? Make sure you have some questions. The answer cannot be, no, I don't have any questions. That's the one response during the interview that, is wrong. So come up with something. Investigate the website so that you're not asking a question that is easily answerable. A good question is not, hey, do you guys offer Greek? Hey, do you offer study abroad opportunities? A good question is, what opportunities might I have as a first-year student to study abroad, or as a, go ahead, Rick.
I think too, one of the great questions, because you have a moment in time and an opportunity with someone who obviously loves that school,
yes,
is to ask them, right? What do you love most about your school, or something about that, which is, again, relational and conversational, and you can learn a lot in that type of a moment too. So great advice, Mr.
Maybe you've discovered that your interviewer has been working there for 20 years, or is an alumnus of the school, or sent his or her children to the school. If you discover that throughout the course of your interview, dig into that. What's kept you here for so long? What brought you back to campus? What made you okay with sending your children here? Whatever the question is. Okay, last two components. The SAT is certainly important. I will say briefly, in general, in this world, the general trend is people want to get to know the applicant as a person, more and more personal interactions, teacher recommendations, conversations with people like Mr. Dugan and myself. And they care less and less about the SAT score and standardized testing in general. So it is important. Study for it. Do well. Let's move on. Like I said, go to SSAT.org.
Can I make one point on it? Because obviously it's on people's minds all the time, Mr. Kenyon, which is it's also an important part of the fit component. And those schools that do place more emphasis on SSAT may or may not be a match for a specific student. So you do your best on it. And there are a lot of technicalities, and it really should be a separate conversation in terms of how we guide our parents around the verbal, quantitative, and reading sections. But I think that having peace of mind and balance is the key with this.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so applications. There are two common applications out there that our families use. First of all, there's one that basically, if you're applying to an independent school, it is highly likely that you're going to use the Standard Application Online. It's called the Standard Application Online, the SAO. It is produced by the same people that produce the SSAT test that you will take, called the EMA, the Enrollment Management Association. It is accepted by hundreds of schools across the country as a common app, so that you can apply to multiple schools and only have to fill out, your biographical information and all that kind of stuff once. It also only gives you opportunities to write the one set of essays. So you can't, write an essay, this is why I'm the perfect fit for this school. You have to write, this is why, I want to go to independent school in general, and I'll be a great asset to whichever school, gets me, kind of thing. There's a second common application called the Gateway to Prep Schools application. This is used by Andover, Exeter, Choate, Hotchkiss. It's all these New England boarding schools, about 40 of them. It's also accepted by some Mid-Atlantic boarding schools as well, but it's a second common application that some people might also have to fill out. And then you've got schools that will have individual applications, so all Catholic and parochial schools, they'll have their own applications. They'll actually have their own standardized tests as well. So you might not have to take the SSAT. You might take the high school placement exam that's specific to that Catholic high school. And then there's schools like St. Andrews down in Delaware that still does their own application. If you're applying to the Learning Center for, learning difference at certain schools, you'll fill out a specific application and not one of these common apps. So there's some differences. So my recommendation is to you is to start this list. If you're, a year and a half out of the process of all the schools you're considering, you can do it in, a Google Sheet or a Google Doc, or however you want to do it. And figure out, okay, these are the 20 schools that we might end up applying to, even if it's only going to be, 4 or 5 in the end. and figure out which ones are SAO, which ones are Gateway, which ones might be their own application, what all the requirements are. Do these schools require interviews? Most schools that require in-person interviews are obviously going to be doing their interviews via Zoom or Skype or some other method, this year. So they'll have options for kids out there.
And my advice is, once again, take your time and be thoughtful. And as an English teacher by background, rarely do you get it the way you want it on your first draft. So take time. Don't be afraid to take some risks and make mistakes in the drafting process so that you can really get to something that represents who you are, your voice, and what you want to say. Take some chances with that too. And when you get to that, versus doing it toward the last minute. And I really want to put into context, because people don't understand this sometimes. Applications go live in early September. They're generally due in early January. So you've got September, October, November, and December at least to work on these applications. Now, it might vary a little bit by school, but that's 3 to 4 months. And by the way, we want you to have an awesome 8th grade year. So make this manageable by working on it over time. And parents, we can help guide our children in that way.
Definitely. And I will say, I don't want to scare anyone, but I will say that applications can be maybe the least forgiving part of the process. I think it's maybe when admissions officers tend to forget that they're thinking about 13 and 14-year-olds the most. When you're sitting in an interview, when you're reading teacher recommendations, you remember this is a kid, this is someone who's growing. But when they're reading those essays, man, they want those to be perfect. Mr. Dugan just said it. You got 4 months to work on them. So, lowercase i's and bad capitalization, bad punctuation, nothing will make someone throw an application into the bad pile quicker than someone that looks like they haven't put any effort into their essays. All right, let's keep rolling so we can get to any questions. What can we do right now? So you're a year and a half in the process. Let's say you're 2.5 years away from the process, whatever it is. Things that we get asked about over and over are character, citizenship, and contributions. What kind of young man is this young man? What kind of young woman is this young woman? And what do they do? What do they do at your school? What can we project them doing at our school, etc.? So being a good person, getting involved in the life of your school, getting involved in the other communities of which you are a part, whether it's your church or your Boy Scouts, or helping out with some camp in your neighborhood, or getting certified in lifeguard duty, or whatever it is. Kids are doing so many cool things these days, and they can all be stories that we can tell throughout this process. So.
And I think that we're all living through incredibly extraordinary times. And everybody's got a story to tell right now in some way, shape, or form that may reveal resilience in certain ways. And so I love this slide, Mr. Kenyon, because these are 3 values that matter a lot. And just by way of contribution, at Princeton Academy, we're so proud of our young men when they go off, and in 9th grade, they're looking for ways to get involved. As an educator, I'll always say that engagement equals happiness, right? So the more engaged a student is, the happier he or she will be. It's just a fact over my years of experience. And so what are those things that make you smile, that fill your heart, that strengthen you? Does the secondary school that you're looking at offer those things? Also, you're 13 or 14 years old. I did not know what my passions were when I was 14. It took me life and I discover new ones every day. So what are those things that I've never done that I would love to try that look cool at that school too? So thanks for this slide. I love it.
Yeah. And for decades there, a super common interview question was, what are you passionate about? People are starting to move away from that word a little bit, but something along those lines. If you don't get asked, what are you passionate about? You're certainly going to get asked, what do you like to do? Or what makes you smile, or something along those lines. So think about those things that make you happy. This is our list. Tara mentioned off the top that the class of 2020 earned admission to 28 different secondary schools. You see a lot of New Jersey schools on that list. We got Blair Academy. We got the Hun School of Princeton. We got Lawrenceville. We got Notre Dame High School, Petty School, Pennington, Princeton Day, Rutgers Prep. that is it. But then we have, just in Pennsylvania, George School is very close to where we are here in Princeton, as is Solbury School, and St. Joe's Prep is just on the other side of Philly, and a pretty easy trip for our boys too. So over the years, we've sent about roughly a third of our boys off to boarding school, and we've sent about roughly 2/3 of our boys to local New Jersey independent schools, and public options. We're also in a great area for public schools. Obviously, over the years, a lot of our families have seen Princeton High School as a really good option for them. Montgomery High School is a really good option in our area, and there are others as well. So this is if you happen to be on the circuit and going around and hearing from other K-8 schools about their secondary school placement process, this will probably be their first slide. It's close to our last, because we really like to concentrate on fit and process and what makes us different. Because we really, we love what we do. We love our boys more than anything. And this, impressive as it may be, doesn't mean as much as the 30 boys behind it, and knowing all of them and seeing where they're going off next year.
And, beginning with the end in mind, we talked about mission in the beginning. So no matter where you are in the process, as you hear Mr. Kenyon talk about where we are in Princeton, you might have great local public school option. You may have tremendous day school options. They may be faith-based. They may be single gender. They may be co-ed. There's so many varieties. You may be open to boarding school. Boarding school may be completely foreign to you. If you are open to learning about it, the concept of boarding school is something to investigate as well. And so I say all of this because with the broadest strokes, there's so many different types of schools when we focus on fit.
Definitely. Cool. And this is, again, PASH specific, so we can just glance over this, but this is our last 5 years. It's where our students end up enrolling. So you can see there, roughly about 1/6 of our students have ended up at the Lawrenceville School over the last 5 years, and roughly about 1/6 of our students have ended up at the Pennington School over the last 5 years. So that's 1/3 of our students. And then about another 1/3 have ended up at Hunn, Princeton Day School, Petty, Princeton High School. So these other schools right here in the area. But we're very proud that 3 of our young men from the class of 2020 will be going on to Andover, a couple to Blair, 1 to Hotchkiss, one more to Berkshire on this list, 1 more to St. Joe's Prep on this list. So we had a great group of kids this year. We're really excited about where they're headed off to. So that's it. And again, beginning with the end in mind, you can see from my title right there that my work's not over. So these kids that are off at these schools right now, I'm busy engaging them, keeping them invested in Princeton Academy, keeping them coming out to our annual Hawk Bowl flag football game every Thanksgiving, and keeping them involved in community service. Our alumni community has really reached out to me to make it clear that that's what they want to do when they get together with their Princeton Academy brothers is serve others. So it's great. I love what I do. Tara, we're so grateful to have this platform and opportunity here. If anyone on the line has any questions, we're happy to take them now. I'd be happy to give my email address, whatever.
Yeah, that'd be great if you would.
My email address right there. Boom.
Oh yeah, you're right. It is.
I have a question.
Thank you both.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi. How much do you recommend that parents get involved in the application process versus letting the child do it themselves when it comes to sort of essays and all that?
Yeah. So are we talking about a 9th grade applicant?
Cool.
Yeah.
Applying for 9th grade. Yeah.
Applying for 9th grade. Cool. So a young person. So I think, reading their essays, totally fine. Making sure that it's in their voice, as Rick said earlier, really, really important. So schools are going to get other opportunities to see your child's writing too. So the SSAT has a writing sample. And then on occasion, schools sneak in some sort of writing sample to their interview process. So the day that you're there interviewing, they're like, oh, here, fill out this form. And so they will have other opportunities to see your child's writing. So if the essay is this perfect, perfectly crafted, polished essay, and then their SAT writing sample is hardly that, it could raise some eyebrows. I will say then, in general in the process, we like to encourage our young men to take the lead on things like communications with admissions officers and coaches that they're trying to get recruited by, etc. but it's usually more appropriate for the parent to reach out and schedule the interview. We have had young 8th grade men, take control of that part of the process too, and go around and schedule their interviews and stuff like that, and make sure mom or dad are available to drive them. But it usually makes more sense for mom or dad to do that. Rick also mentioned that the day of the tour of the interview, that is a really good day to, sort of take a back seat. You will have your chances. When you're in that parent portion of the interview, after your son or daughter has already been interviewed, don't be shy. Ask any question that's on your mind, anything that's important to you, anything that you think, might be, not a nice question to ask, whether it's, about finances or about things that are going on at the school or board level decisions or whatever question you might have, or you're considering boarding school, but you don't feel good about letting, being away from your son or daughter, whatever's, on your mind, use that time wisely. But when you're walking around on the tour and when you're down in the lobby, shaking the admissions officer's hands, definitely let, your son or daughter shine and take the lead there, I would say.
And Wendy, I would say, first of all, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. And it's a great question, and Taylor answered it thoroughly in every way. I think from our experience, different families do it different ways. And I think it starts with knowing your child. And I know your question was specifically about the application. I've spent decades working with students, again, from an English teacher perspective as well. And my rule was always, I, as the adult, will never put pen to paper for the child. I would sit with the child, have he or she read it with me, and then ask, what do you mean by that, right? Or is that spelled, those types of things. I mean, of course, when it comes to hitting submit on a finished product as a parent, there's no crime in seeing it. We do have some boys who occasionally, like, the parent will be like, wow, I didn't even see the essay, sent it forward, and that's great, right? But I think in general, but I do think another piece to it, and it's just a real piece, is that on another extreme, if the essay is not authentically the child's, it could be glaring when they have to do the handwritten writing sample on the SSAT in a 25-minute window, right? Those types of things. But your question's right on. Again, I think if you're in the drafting phase with your child, and ask those prompt questions and help them, that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Tara, anything else?
Oh, you guys are awesome. This is really a terrific, really terrific webinar. I appreciate you guys. And Wendy, thank you for turning on and joining us, asking questions. This is terrific. And I look forward to our next journey.
Cool.
Absolutely. And to everyone in the Centercourt community, as Taylor had put up emails, please do feel free to reach out. Again, son or daughter, whomever it might be, one of our great joys is helping young people find that next place where they will thrive. I'll close with John Dewey, one of the great educational thinkers of all time in the progressive education movement, famously said that education is not preparation for life. Education is life. And if we think of our child's journey, you only get to be 13 once. You only get to be 16 once. To be in a place where you are needed, known, valued, seen, heard, and happy, what more could we want for our children? So,
which is why we invented 360.
Woo! Awesome.
When they finish wherever they are, they come over to us and we round them out.
Yeah, it's so special. And congrats.
Good team.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We're grateful for this opportunity, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you both. Have a great night. Thanks,
Cool.
Wendy.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.